Hey everybody, this is Chris with OverclockersClub. If you know anything about Scythe, you're already familiar with the Mugen 5 Rev B or the Fuma 2. Now I've reviewed both of these coolers already and they perform remarkably well. In fact, for me, it's what really puts Scythe on the air cooling map. But today we've got the Ninja 5. This thing is obviously considerably larger than these other coolers, so it'll be interesting to see how much better it performs. So I've got some high expectations. Let's get out of the box and see what it looks like. Now looking at the Mugen 5 Rev B and the Fuma 2, they both have bases that are just absolutely packed with heat pipes. So we have 12 termination points at the top on both of these, and we have the same formula here with the Ninja 5. So Scythe seems to do a pretty good job of packing that base absolutely full of heat pipes. So obviously that's a formula that has worked well for them. So we'll get the main unit out here. The heat sink. So that thing is just massive. So looking back at the way the termination points are, which is basically the path that the heat pipes take up through the fin stack. On the Mugen 5 Rev B, we have 12 termination points, but we have 4 rows of 3, and they're all sort of in line there. But when we come down and look at the Fuma 2, we still have 12 termination points, or 6 heat pipes. They have a little different approach here. We have a row of 3 here, here, here. So we still have 4 rows of 3, but they're sort of in the airflow path a little differently. Plus we have 2 fans compared to the single fan here on the Mugen 5. So the Fuma 2, they sort of changed the alignment of the heat pipes and we added a second fan, which brings us to the Ninja 5. So we still have 12 termination points, but you can see they're in a little different pattern. We have a little more of a symmetrical fin stack there. We measure about 122 by about 130 millimeters. And we've got some notches here at the bottom for RAM clearance here. Depending upon your motherboard and how many sticks of RAM you've got and how tall it is, this may or may not be a big deal for you. But you can see we got some decent notches on both sides. And it appears that this is largely symmetrical, about the center line of the base. And again, you can see the 6 heat pipes that snake their way through there. Another thing they've done with this cooler is we have the mounting bracket already attached to the base. We've got screws that are spring-loaded and retained, so you don't have hardware to chase around when you're installing this. You can go straight down from the top and get right into those screws, with, of course, a really long screwdriver. Now as we scan down the side of the box here, let's look at some of the information. We've got this HPMS, which is Hyper Precision Mounting System 3. So they put some engineering into their hardware for the mounting, so that'll be interesting to see how easy that goes together. High memory compatibility, that's where the 2 notches in the sides of the fin stack come in handy to allow for your RAM modules to fit. We've got the dual fan design. This is a Kaze Flex. They're 120 millimeter fans. We've got 2 of them. These are the standard thickness. Back to the Fuma 2, it used the same fan here, but we have the Kaze 120 thin on this side, or slim I should say. So we actually have 2 different versions of that fan, whereas here we use 2 of the exact same fan, same thickness. And quiet operation, they're referring to the rubber isolator pads here at the corners. So if there's any vibration when it's mounted against the fin stack there, that'll help quiet that down. And the fans are both, of course, 4-pin PWM connectors. Looking in the hardware box, there is that familiar included Scythe screwdriver, which is very nice because it's extra long to get down through that fin stack. Got our mounting hardware, base plate, thermal paste. There's the splitter, so you can run 2 fans off of one header on the motherboard. And of course, the instructions. And it's always good to take a quick glance through here and familiarize yourself with these before you start the install. Alright, so looking at some of the specifications, the dimensions here on the side of the box, when I measured earlier, I think I was measuring across the narrow part. So actually it's square, 130 millimeters when you measure across the widest points there. And another key dimension that is very important is the 155 millimeter overall height. So you want to make sure that the case you use is capable of handling a cooler that size. We'll come down here and look at other useful information. Here we go, your socket coverage. You've got all your main current sockets for Intel. You've got your socket 2011 V3 and your 2066 AMD. You're all the way up to your AM4. And then other interesting information, your fan speed says 300 plus or minus 200 to 800 RPMs. Quite a bit of wiggle room there. 4 to 14.5 decibels, so that's pretty quiet. Your airflow is 16.6 up to a little over 43 CFMs. And let's see, the bearing, you got 120,000 hours mean time to failure there, so that should last a very long time. Alright, so on the left I have the Fuma 2, all stripped down with no fans, and we have the Ninja 5 here on the right with no fans. Looking at the fin stacks, you can see there are some very big differences between these two coolers. We actually have 50 fins on this side, even though it doesn't look like it, and we have about 40 on this side. But to compensate for fewer fins, they are larger, so we have a fin stack that has more surface area, but we make up for that by having more fins on this side, so they're actually smaller fins sort of stuck in between. Then we have the grossly offset base plate there again for RAM clearance. But we still have the same 6 millimeter heat pipes, and we have the same number, so we have 6 that pass through the base on this side, and you can see they're all sort of in line with each other, and we have a little different approach with 6 heat pipes on this base, but the approach of the heat pipes passing through the fin stack, they're sort of offset or staggered. The ultimate goal there is to expose the fins and the heat pipes to as much airflow as possible to extract the heat. Now it is time to get the cooler installed to the motherboard. You start with the base plate, and in the instructions it shows these little studs here can be adjusted based on which CPU you're using. Since I'm using a 4770K, which is for a socket 1150, LGA 1150, it shows you where these studs get positioned, and then you slide this little clip over and the base is ready to go. And then there are these, for this particular CPU, or this socket I should say, there are these plastic spacers, these little barrel spacers, and there's actually a little rubber foot on one side, so you need to make sure that the rubber foot is what goes down against the motherboard. And if you have a socket, an older socket 775, there's actually a little rubber little isolator pad that glues in the middle there. There's a little relief for it, but since we got 1150, we don't use that. Now this is a tray that I made to hold the motherboard up, and we install it like that, and then since the rubber foot there is a little smaller diameter, it sort of pushes over the stud, and there's enough interference that it sort of holds the bracket in place after you get a couple of these pushed on there. Then the other two, and again you make sure the rubber foot goes down like that. So now I'll get the thermal paste on there, get these brackets installed, and then we can do some thermal testing. There is one thing I should mention though. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new cooler, especially if you're building a completely new system from the ground up, but most coolers, in fact every one I've ever seen, whether it's liquid or air, come with a little protective sticker, a little piece of plastic that's over the base here, and it's to protect it, keep it from getting scratched up. But if you accidentally forget and install it with that on there, well, you'll be unhappy because your temperatures will be very high even at idle. So you need to take that off before you install it. So now I have the thermal paste on, the cooler is seated, and the last thing to do is to tighten the last two mounting screws. And what you want to do is get one started, then get the other one started, and then you want to alternate back and forth. You don't want to tighten one all the way down and then do the other one. You actually want to do a little bit on one side and then go back and forth until they are both evenly tightened down. So I go back and forth and do a few turns on each one. And you know you're done when the screws bottom out and you're relying on the spring pressure on those fasteners to put the down force on the cooler against the CPU. So when the screws are bottomed out, you are done. So now it's time to get the fans on there. So the airflow will be this direction because this is where the back of the case is. So the exhaust fan for the case would be right in this area. So we want the airflow to go that way. So if you look which direction your fan is going, we know that one needs to go like that and the other one needs to go like this. So now I got to get the clips installed. So since this fan, when it spins that direction, it pushes air that way, which means I need to put the clips on the front or the outer face so they push over a little rubber corner piece like that. And then you'll be pulling it this way to seat right in the groove here, right on the edge of the cooler. So this one will sit right above the ram. That locks into that groove, and then you pull the other side, lock into the groove on the other side, and that fan is done. Now we're ready for this one. So the system is all assembled and powered up. I decided to use the dedicated fan headers here for CPU fan 1 and CPU fan 2, so each fan is plugged into the dedicated header there. You can use this included splitter so that you can run both fans off of one motherboard header, and that's fine. If you need to conserve your fan headers for other fans, then you can save one here, leave one open for some other fan, and just run everything off of one. The other thing is, earlier I mentioned that these fans were the exact same fans as used on the Fuma 2. They actually are not. The model number is different. I didn't realize that. The difference is these run at about 800 RPMs, and the fans on the Fuma 2 run at about 1200, so they're a little faster, and of course they make a little more noise. But these are just dead quiet. And I've got these cranked up all the way to 800 RPMs just to see what they sound like, and they are dead quiet. So now I can start getting some thermal imaging and stress test it, and let's see what the temperatures look like. Alright, so we have the system cranked up to 4.2 gigahertz on this 4770K. Fans are cranked up to full speed, which is 800 or a little over. Actually, one of them is showing about 830 RPMs. So we'll take a look here. And right now we're holding at about 74 degrees C on the CPU temp. And you can sort of see the heat pipes there with the thermal camera. The VRM there is, of course, a little toasty, which is not too surprising down there. Get a little closer. Yeah, it's about 53, 55, yeah. And then looking at the back of the cooler here, of course here's the intake side. You can see a little bit of the warmth there through the fan blades spinning, and there's where the fan motor is. And we'll look on the the back side, and it looks about the same as the other side there. Most of the heat, of course, is toward the bottom. And then as you get toward the top, it usually tends to cool down a little bit. So we're holding right around 74C there at 4.2 gigahertz, which is not bad for this cooler and puts us just a little bit better than the Fuma 2. And I'll post those numbers. And so the Mugen 5 Rev B comes in around 80 degrees C, the Fuma 2 comes in around 76, and the Ninja 5 comes in around 74. Of course, your mileage will vary depending upon the case that you're using and the number of fans and the temperature in your room, so all of those variables have an effect. So the Mugen 5 here proved that it can handle the heat. We were holding around 74 degrees, which is a couple of degrees better than the Fuma 2. Again, we've got a much larger heat sink. We've got the two 120 millimeter fans, so it's not really a surprise. But again, what it really comes down to is how much airflow you can get through your case. Because if I can't get airflow through my case, it doesn't matter how good my cooler is. I can't get enough air through there to pull the heat away. So right now, you can find the Ninja 5 on Amazon for around $60. I think that's a decent price for what you get. And again, it proved that it can handle the heat. Installation was easy. Make sure you check out your manual. So I would give this the Overclockers Club Gold rating. This is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.